Looks like there's 5 people showed up so far. How's everybody doing today? Welcome.
There's 5 people showed up so far. How's everybody doing today?
Whoops. Let me get that off of there. Well, I got a couple of things I'm going to talk about tonight, anyway. One thing I want to talk about is this article I ran across having to do with Google. It's called Google's Sensor Vault Can Tell Police Where You've Been. So, let me just read it, or let me see if I can get this thing. I know this thing will read it to us. Get my computer to read it for us.
Issues. Our work. Take action. Tools. Donate. Google's Sensor Vault Can Tell Police Where You've Been. By Jennifer Lynch. April 18, 2019. Do you know where you were 5 years ago? Did you have an Android phone at the time? It turns out Google might know, and it might be telling law enforcement. In a new article, the New York Times details a little-known technique increasingly used by law enforcement to figure out everyone who might have been within certain geographic areas during specific time periods in the past. The technique relies on detailed location data collected by Google from most Android devices as well as iPhones and iPads that have Google Maps and other apps installed. This data resides in a Google-maintained database called Sensor Vault, and because Google stores this data indefinitely, Sensor Vault includes detailed location records involving at least hundreds of millions of devices worldwide and dating back nearly a decade. The data Google is turning over to law enforcement is so precise that one deputy police chief said it shows the whole pattern of life. It's collected even when people aren't making calls or using apps, which means it can be even more detailed than data generated by cell towers. One deputy police chief said Google's location data shows the whole pattern of life. The location data comes from GPS signals, cell phone towers, nearby Wi-Fi devices and Bluetooth beacons. According to Google, users opt into collection of the location data stored in Sensor Vault. However, Google makes it very hard to resist opting in, and many users may not understand that they have done so. Also, Android devices collect lots of other location data by default, and it's extremely difficult to opt out of that collection. Using a single warrant, often called a geofence or reverse location warrant, police are able to access location data from dozens to hundreds of devices that are linked to real people, many of whom, and perhaps in some cases all of whom, have no tie to criminal activity and have provided no reason for suspicion. The warrants cover geographic areas ranging from single buildings to multiple blocks, and time periods ranging from a few hours to a week. So far, according to the Times and other outlets, this technique is being used by the FBI and police departments in Arizona, North Carolina, California, Florida, Minnesota, Maine, and Washington, although there may be other agencies using it across the country. But police aren't limiting the use of the technique to egregious or violent crimes. Minnesota Public Radio reported the technique has been used to try to identify suspects who stole a pickup truck and, separately, $650 worth of tires. Google is getting up to 180 requests a week for data and is, apparently, struggling to keep up with the demand. Law enforcement appears to be seeking warrants to access this extremely detailed location data. However, it's questionable whether the affidavits supporting those warrants truly establish probable cause, and also questionable whether judges fully understand what they're authorizing when issuing these warrants. According to the Times, the warrants frequently rely on an officer's assertion that the fact that Americans own cell phones and that Google held location data on many of these phones somehow supports probable cause for the warrant. The warrants also list GPS coordinates that supposedly geofence the geographic area for which they are requesting data, but many don't include a map showing the area itself. Without a visual representation, there's almost no way to tell how large or small the geographic area covered by the warrant is. Law enforcement seems to be using a three-step process to learn the names of device holders. In some cases, a single warrant authorizes all three steps. In the first step, the officer specifies the area and time period of interest, and in response, Google gives the police information on all the devices that were there. Identified by anonymous numbers. This step may reveal hundreds of devices. After that, officers can narrow the scope of their request to fewer devices, and Google will release even more detailed data, including data on where devices traveled outside the original requested area and time period. This data, which still involves multiple devices, reveals detailed travel patterns. In the final step, detectives review that travel data to see if any devices appear relevant to the crime, and they ask for the user's names and other information for specific individual devices. This technique is problematic for several reasons. First, unlike other methods of investigation used by the police don't start with an actual suspect or even a target device. They work backward from a location and time to identify a suspect. This makes it a fishing expedition, the very kind of search that the Fourth Amendment was intended to prevent. Searches like these, where the only information the police have is that a crime has occurred, are much more likely to implicate innocent people who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Every device owner in the area during the time at issue becomes a suspect for no other reason than that they own a device that shares location information with Google. Second, as the Supreme Court recognized in Carpenter v. United States last summer, detailed travel data like this can provide an intimate window into a person's life, revealing not only his particular movements, but through them his familial, political, professional, religious, and sexual associations. This is exactly what the deputy police chief recognized when he said Google location data shows the whole pattern of life. Third, there's a high probability the true perpetrator isn't even included in the data disclosed by Google. For these kinds of warrants, officers are just operating off a hunch that the unknown suspect had a cell phone that generated location data collected by Google. This shouldn't be enough to support probable cause, because it's just as likely that the suspect wasn't carrying an Android phone or using Google Apps at the time. Techniques like this also reveal big problems with our current warrant system. Even though the standard for getting a warrant is higher than other legal procedures and EFF pushes for a warrant requirement for digital data and devices, warrants, alone, are no longer enough to protect our privacy. Through a single warrant, the police can access exponentially more and more detailed information about us than they ever could in the past. Here, the police are using a single warrant to get access to location information for hundreds of devices. In other contexts, through a single warrant, officers can access all the data on a cell phone or a hard drive, all email stored in a Google account, possibly going back years, and all information linked to a social media account, including photos, posts, private communications, and contacts. We shouldn't allow the government to have such broad access to our digital lives. One way we could limit access is by passing legislation that mandates heightened standards, minimization procedures, and particularity requirements for digital searches. We already have this in laws that regulate wiretaps, where police, in addition to demonstrating probable cause, must state that they have first tried other investigative procedures, or state why other procedures wouldn't work, and also describe how the wiretap will be limited in scope and time. The Fourth Amendment itself also supports limits on the scope of individual warrants. It states that warrants must particularly describe the place to be searched, and the persons or things to be seized. However, many courts merely rubber stamp warrant requests without questioning the broad scope of the request. As the Times article notes, This technique implicates innocent people and has a real impact on people's lives. Even if you are later able to clear your name, if you spend any time at all in police custody, this could cost you your job, your car, and your ability to get back on your feet after the arrest. One man profiled in the Times article spent nearly a week in police custody and was having trouble recovering, even months after the arrest. He was arrested at work and subsequently lost his job. Due to the arrest, his car was impounded for investigation and later repossessed. These are the kinds of far-reaching consequences that can result from overly broad searches, so courts should subject geolocation warrants to far more scrutiny.
So that was pretty interesting, I thought, when I stumbled across that. Our local news had an article they had on, a news clip thing they were doing, and they mentioned just briefly about it. So I started actually Googling it to see what that was all about. And when it said that it could go back years and give them all this information, and then I saw how the judges were doing it, I was like, wow, that's a bit much. But basically, I knew this was coming down the pipeline, that one day it was going to happen. But just didn't think they were quite there all the way yet. I knew the NSA could do a lot of that stuff, but I didn't know that Google was doing a lot of that stuff and that the police were getting that information from them. So that's just one more thing for us to look at as to why, what was going on, that if they could get all that information. How many phones did Paddock have? Was it like 5 or something? And I'm sure a couple of them were burner phones, but they probably know a whole lot more about where he was or where those phones were anyway than we're ever going to see. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Something, I'll end up putting the link to that in here after it uploads. After this live stream uploads, I'll put the link to that in there. Now, I'm not sure how. Let me see if I can get my YouTube screen back up here so I can see the chat and everything, because I want to see if this is working on this phone like I meant for it to work. Y'all should be just seeing my logo. That's what you should be seeing. There we go. Now I can see the chat in here better. I got it all pulled up. So let me look over the comments in here a little bit, see if there's anything. I had to kind of start over because I had an issue with the first live stream that was going. I'm not going to say who, but somebody was in there and they were typing in Arabic. Somebody we all know. And so I couldn't get them blocked, so I started a new live stream and then I blocked them. So anyway, next thing I want to show y'all, I've been really keeping my eyes on what's going on in the Middle East. I know this doesn't have anything to do with Las Vegas, but I've really been keeping an eye on what's going on over there. I don't know if y'all watch a guy named Marfugel, but I watch him, and there's been some pretty interesting stuff going on there this past week. People calling in saying they're finding, they're just talking about different strange things going on and movements of things, movements of generators, electric equipment, electric wire, military, National Guard quietly being called up. So I thought that was, all interesting and all. But let me see if I can show y'all this picture. There's a girl that works for us. Our twins are handicapped. And let's see if this will pull the picture up on top of it. I know there's going to be a delay on it. Let's see if this cancel. Okay, so y'all aren't seeing that. Y'all are seeing my computer screen. Let me turn that one on. Oh, it's got a delay, but I didn't think it had that much of a delay on it. Okay, it's still just showing. It's an awful slow delay with this app. Okay, why is it not showing that picture? Well, I'm trying something new, and it's not actually working all that great. So there's more than one way to skin a cat, so let me try this. Where did it put those other pictures? Okay. Y'all see that picture right there? Let me get as close as I can. That was an airplane that was landing here in Waco today at the Waco Regional Airport. And I'm going to send this stuff to Marfugel, but this is really weird. Waco does not have an Air Force base. And that, I did a little research on that plane. So let me find that other picture. I blew it up. I've got to close-up picture of it. There's a close-up of it. So it looked to me like a military